Our keynote has an amazing story. I mean, and you're going to hear about some of it, I'm sure, in this presentation. But he's a certified substance abuse disorder counselor, has a master's degree in political science. He's certified by the Superior Court of Butte County as an expert witness. He consults for the Butte County Public Defender's Office for adult and juvenile alcohol and drug treatment and rehabilitation. And he's got a whole list of titles and degrees and accomplishments. So I just want to let you know, I'm going to give this to you, if you want to just kind of paraphrase that.
Okay. So Joaquin está certificado en abuso de sustancias, el consejo, ha agarrado su máster en ciencia de política y pues en realidad es una super persona para tener la oportunidad de tenerlo hoy aquí con nosotros.
So let's give a warm welcome to Joaquin Jordan, our keynote speaker. He's our talent for today, this first hour.
Good day.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm super nervous every time I speak, so I almost ran out the door. But okay. So, how many single parents in here? Oh, single dad? That's awesome. All right. Oh, single dad. Cool. I'm a product of a single parent household. So just to give you a little background first, I'm system impacted. Specifically, I spent 7 years in the juvenile system and 24 in the adult system. So total incarceration time, like 31 years. I spent 31 years incarcerated. Really bad addiction, criminality as a teenager. I was able to turn it around. And actually the first person that gave me a job upon my release was Joy Morrow. So I'm paying her back now. So today we're going to talk about the use of emotions and advocacy. And this is really important to me personally because I can remember moments in my childhood where my mom needed to stand up for me, but she had a lot of shame and trauma, and it really interfered with her advocating for me in a way that kind of moved me forward. So for me, this is a personal thing where I really want people to have the ability to hold space for the pressures of life and still make really good moves that are going to move them and their families forward. All right, so we're going to talk about the ABCs of advocacy. And so advocacy is the bridge, as it says here, that fosters attachment, nurtures belonging, and strengthens the fabric of connection. But what I really want to talk about attachment is authenticity, because many times people will sacrifice authenticity for attachment. They will not show up as them real selves because they really need to connect with people and attach. And so this is a huge thing when we're talking about who are you as a parent and who are you as a person? And when in your life have you had to sacrifice your authenticity in order to get something you need for you or your family? So many times we make these compromises and we feel a certain way about it, but like, what are we supposed to do, right? How do we learn how not to sacrifice our authenticity in order to connect? And so we're gonna say, for the sake of what? Like, why do we need to know these things? Because many times when we're trying to advocate for children, we don't understand that sometimes being right is not gonna make things right, right? So sometimes we really have to strive for making things right because this is what our kiddos need. And I'll give you an example. So when I was in the 5th grade, I went to a new school that was a magnet school in Los Angeles, California for gifted kids. And it was an integrated school with lots of diversity. And for the first time, I started seeing families that had 2 parents in the household. So I would go to my friend's house and there was a mom and a dad. And in my neighborhood, it was just a lot of single female parents. And that's what I was used to. So seeing these 2-parent homes, I was like confused because my dad was in prison. And I didn't know how to deal with that. And so when my friends would ask me, hey, where's your dad? he's at work. And so there was a lot of shame that I had to process. And as a fifth grader, I didn't know how to process childhood incarceration, being a child of an incarcerated parent. I didn't know what that felt like because my dad was never there. So I really did not have a feeling of his absence until I started seeing other people who had dads present. So my mom had a little brother who was in the Marine Corps, and I loved to read. So I started to create these stories that my dad was in the military, that he was a fighter pilot. And I would tell these outlandish stories as a fifth grader, because in my fifth grade mind, the only audience I have are other fifth graders, and they're buying it, right? So it's working for me. But then my teachers start becoming concerned. And so my teachers called my mom in, and they asked her, like, hey, you know, we're concerned Joaquin's like telling these stories. Can you kind of tell us what's going on? And my mom says, they're all true. They're all true. And so I remember the principal looking like, oh, you know, as I remember this. But what I did not appreciate then was the parental shame that my mom had of being a single mom, of being a teenager who was raising a child raising a child, having to sit in front of an administrator who did not look like her. So she felt a lot of shame. And in her mind, the only thing that she can do was support me was to confirm this lie. Now, this didn't help me because I developed this pattern of lying to compensate for my shame. And this carried on for years. And it took me a long time to really develop the skills to process my own shame and guilt for my own behavior, let alone for how I felt less than. So for me, when I'm talking about advocacy and I'm talking to parents and other caregivers, it is important for us to understand that in order for us to be really good advocates for our children and our families, we really need to be able to have the skills to deal with the pressures of life. And a lot of time that shows up because we may be undereducated, we may be underemployed, we may be working 2 to 3 jobs to care for our kids. We may not speak the primary language of the school district that we're in. We may be interacting with gatekeepers who do not look like us. We may be interacting with people who do not think like us, who have no understanding of what it means to operate on our environment in the skin that we're in. And that creates a lot of shame and or anger, and it interferes with our ability to appropriately and constructively advocate for our kids. So this is super important. So I'm a super interactive speaker. So if you can kind of roll with me, I like to do a centering exercise, because this is going to be a skill-based presentation somewhat. Joy said I can do what I wanted to do. So if I could have your permission to invite you to do this exercise with me? Yes? All right, so let's stand up.
Oh, I figure mine.
No changing your mind. You said yes. And if you're a vendor, you can participate in this also. So I'm also a somatic coach. And the one thing about somatics is, like, as you position your body, your mood will go. And there are 4 domains that we operate in every day of our lives. The first is safety. Like, we need to be safe and we need to feel safe. The second is belonging. We need to be connected with people. Like, as a species, we require more caregiving than most other species. So being connected with people keeps us safe and allows for us to grow. The third is dignity. And so that's something that a lot of people don't talk about. But we all have an inherent right for dignity. And many times we will sacrifice dignity for safety and belonging. And the fourth domain is the organizing principle of our life. For the sake of what? Why are you doing the things that you do? For many of you in this room, you're here because you want your children to have the best life possible, correct? Yes. Right? Yes. Trying to figure out how to be a good parent, correct? Right? So those are the 4 domains. And so I'm going to ask you to, stand with your feet kind of shoulder width apart. and just feel yourself connected to the planet. Like the strongest force on this planet is gravity, because it literally keeps us attached to the surface of this planet. But many times, stress, fear, anxiety will separate us from our body, and we will either time travel into the future or into the past. So in this moment, just take a few breaths and kind of just feel your feet connected to this planet. Just take a few breaths. I don't see people breathing. Some people are like literally holding their breath. Just breathe, it's okay. And so imagine that there's a string connected to your head and it's gently pulling your head up. So kind of stand with your chin a little high. And this is your domain of dignity. This is your length. Many times, life pressures make you shrink. And so we walk around this planet with our head down, never in our dignity, because we don't want people to see us. So in this moment, just breathe a little bit and just keep your chin up and imagine this string pulling you up and the dignity. Now, I want you to spread your shoulders, spread them wide. Like, what does that feel like to be fully in your stature with your head up? And with your shoulders spread, this is the domain of belonging. Many times we feel like in order for us to be fully human, that we may have to intrude on someone else. So the work is, how do I become fully human? How do I occupy all of my flesh without intruding into someone else? Or feeling like in order for me to belong, I need to shrink. How many women in here have shrunk for connection in order to provide for their children, who stayed in relationships that were less than ideal for the sake of your child, where you felt like you could not keep your head up and you had to shrink in order to be safe? This is a thing, and this impacts us, and it impacts our children, because our kiddos look at us and they see us shrinking in the face of, and sometimes they take that on, that our parents are suffering because of me, and that's not true. And so this last domain, put your hand like right below your belly button and in the small of your back. This is your depth. This is the domain of safety. This is the place where our values reside. This is where we're anchored to in times of stress. This is where the generational legacies of resilience and transcendence lies. Who in here has had a grandmother or a great aunt who has prayed for you and been there for you and supported you and thinks the best of you and wants the most for you? This is where that strength relies. So let's just take a few moments and continue to breathe into all of these domains, and then think about our organizing principle, which is we're here for the sake of our children. So in times of stress, when you're called to the school, or you're in some social service agency, or you're just somewhere needed to do something for your child, this is the place where you are to move from. This is what it feels like to be centered and grounded in all of your flesh. This is the place where you must be able to make a move from, no matter what's going on inside of you or outside of you. For many of us, we are uncomfortable being fully in our body because people have either told us we're not enough, or we don't look like this ideal that's being promoted every day. So we walk around shrunk, and we're unable to make moves under pressure, and many times we crumple. But I just want you to continue to think about all the things that you've overcome, all the things that you face, and what would it feel like to face those same things with your head high, with your shoulders back, being anchored to your values, being able to move under pressure from center. This is what the practice is. Because if you're off balance, you're easy to move around. Think about that. How many times have you been emotionally off balance and your kiddos have moved you around? Or the system has moved you around? Or you've encountered people who deliberately tried to trigger you because they knew if you were off balance, they can have their way with you and get you out of their office. Oh, you said that? That's inappropriate. You have to leave here. Because in that moment of advocacy, our emotions overcame us and we were not able to move from center. So let's just take a few more moments to breathe deeply so we can just kind of feel that energy. And then when you're so ready, just have a seat and we'll continue with our presentation. Thank you. So, these 3 windows, talking about our introduction. Emotional connection enhances engagement and support for advocacies. Many times we struggle with figuring out how we're going to connect with people, right? Get people to do what we may need them to do to help us move forward. And there's a lot of talk about empathy and compassion, and these are really good things. So when we're trying to connect with people, our ability to understand will always trump our need for understanding. Because if you can understand someone, it allows you to exist with them just a little bit easier. How many times have we been in situations where we really just could not understand what was going on, and there was this huge frustration, like, why are you doing this? Like, what's wrong with you? And it interferes with your own ability to move forward. So when we can strive for understanding, when we can communicate with people for the purposes of just understanding where they're coming from, it shifts the narrative. It shifts our own emotional positioning. And so this second piece, emotions are significant in driving advocacy efforts. How many people have seen someone just really passionate about a position and you're like, I want to participate in that? Right? Who's experienced that? Who's seen that mom or that dad who's really passionate and really wants to get something done? And it just feels like intense, right? This is our ability. This is how emotions move us. And so when you look at the word emotion, the origins of that word, it's French, and it starts with, the E for energy and motions. It is, emotions power us. They motivate us. They move us forward. They allow us to get work done. And so when we're thinking about emotions and their ability to influence communication and persuasion, many times when we are caught up in emotional content, there's this, I need to do something. I need to say something, right? And many times we may say the wrong thing because we want to be right. And this goes back for the sake of what? So when we're looking at our own emotional content and we're trying to figure out the emotional communication of someone else, again, if we're operating from the position of, I want to make things right instead of being right. Because my mom used to tell me all the time, you can be right or you can be dead right. And I didn't understand that. Does anybody know what that means? Has an idea what that means? Yes? You made eye contact. I saw you look at me. Yeah? Maybe? Okay. So a lot of times we will be right and burn down our own house, right? How many times have we done that? Yeah, I'm right. Like, you're right and you can leave, right? How many times has that happened? Like, you've been in the DMV and there's some procedure and you know you're right, right? But they don't care. Yes, you are right, but your attitude is bad. So just keep moving before the state police show up. So that's happened to me. Wendy from Chico DMV, she does not like me. So it's important for us to understand that when we're trying to communicate to people and we're trying to persuade people, we have to be able to hold space for our own emotional content so that it does not bleed over and offend someone else. Because you may be right, but the way that you went about it is not going to make things right. So today we're going to talk about the scope of advocacy, understanding emotions, emotions in advocacy, strategies and techniques, emotional intelligence, which is sometimes called EQ, and ethical considerations and challenges that we have to address in our need for advocacy. All right, so the scope of advocacy. So when we're trying to advocate for a person, a place, or a system, it is really, really important for understanding that there are 5 elements that we really need to address in this part of the emotional aspect. Empathy, the ability to walk in someone else's shoes. How many times have you been in a situation and you've been speaking to an administrator or some service provider and you just knew that they did not get it, right? You knew that there was a disconnect and you couldn't bridge that gap, right? And so it just felt like you were talking past each other. And then it just degenerated into an argument, right? So this is super important. Our ability to deploy empathy and somehow get other people to be empathetic with what we're going through requires us to understand our own experience. Many times when we're shrinking, we don't even want to comprehend or even think about our own experience because it can be so traumatic. So a huge part of our own work that we need to do is to be empathetic with ourselves, but also understand our own experience so we can communicate it to people in a way that they can connect with it. The next, compassion, demonstrating genuine care and concern. I know for me, I worked at a shelter, a homeless shelter in Chico when I first came home. And one of the things that was most amazing was every day that I worked there, I got an opportunity to give someone the most important thing that they needed in the world in that moment. It could be a pair of socks, toothbrush, deodorant, a bar of soap, right? But my goal in those moments was to really want them to be free of their suffering in that moment. So just consider that when you're advocating with a service provider, when you're communicating with someone. Although you have a need that needs to be met, what would it feel like if in that same space you were also concerned with what that other person needed? Have you ever been to the DMV somewhere and thought, what does this clerk need from me right now as I'm trying to get my license? Like, who works in a service position? Who works with people here? All right, when you're at work, can I use you as an example? All right.
I've worked a lot, but I worked as a case manager. You can use the example as a housing case manager.
All right, housing case manager. So, what do you need from a client when they show up?
Your papers, your paperwork.
All right, what else do you need?
Just your patience, and I know it's hard. But
All right, there it is,
yeah.
right? If I show up with all my paperwork, but my attitude is poop, do you want to help me?
No, what
Right? So if I can show up to get my needs met, but also concerned with, like, what does that person need who's going to meet my needs? How can I help them help me?
You may get the housing, but you're not going to get all the additional resources that could have offered you with the nice house.
Because you're not even going to talk about it. You go, here you go, here's your voucher. Bios con Dios, right? So it's important for us to really understand that when we show up, we need to show up in a way that reciprocity is going to be working, right? I know you've had a long day. It's 4:30. I'm your last client. I got all my paperwork. But how are you doing today? Right? And I really mean that. I'm not just asking how you're doing because I want to move on to the next question. I'm really concerned. So part of this being a good advocate is also having some compassion. Hope, right? And you're thinking, what does hope have to do with advocacy? Like, how does hope work at the DMV? Like, Wendy from the DMV does not care about hope, right? She did not. But it's important because, again, and if anybody here knows Wendy from the DMV, I'm sorry. So hope, like having a sense of optimism when you show up. Just have a smile on your face. Things are gonna work out. I'm gonna get everything I need done today. And if I don't, I'll be able to figure out what I do need to do. So just showing up with this sense of hope. And then sometimes outrage, right? Righteous anger. Righteous anger sometimes is needed, but how you express your anger is key. I'm in a room full of parents. I was going to say, who has a child that's ever been upset? Who's ever had their child be upset because a sibling or a cousin or friend took a toy from them? Right? Like, they had a right to be upset. But then they smack their cousin, sibling, or friend, right? You're like, you can't do that. Right? So learning how to channel our anger and utilize it to motivate us is key. This is driving me crazy. Is it me, the flickering? Is it me? Okay. I haven't seen you in months. How are you? Okay. Next, resilience. Cultivating resilience, right? Our ability to keep going forward even in the face of things that seem like I should quit, right? Who in here believes or thinks they're resilient? You don't think you're resilient? No? Okay. And so this is part of some of the work that we have to do, right? If you're in this room today breathing, you're resilient, right? If you've overcome anything and you can still smile, can you still smile?
Yeah.
Oh, you're resilient. See, this is what we have to access, because many times it needs to be reflected back to us. Because if we're having really, really tough times, we think we're all alone, no one cares about us, no one sees us, I'm doing this all wrong. No, if you're still in the game, you're still in the game. This is what resilience is. I know a lot of times people throw this word around like candy or hello or goodbye. But resilience is key. And for us to have our own personal knowledge of our own resilience is key. Because we need to know, yes, I've experienced this and I've survived that. I can deal with this. So next, the depth of emotional aspects, personal connection. Advocacy resonates on a personal level. How many personal relationships do you have with your service providers? When you see service providers in your community, do you say hi? Because they're part of your community. That personal connection, as she says, I'm gonna give you everything you have coming and even some new stuff that no one else knows about because I have a personal connection with you. And many times we have been taught that the individual is greater than the community. And that's not true. Because everyone in this room really understands that change and healing works best when it's done with a group of people. How many people in here have a really supportive circle that is outside of your family? How many people have friends that you prefer to your family? Right? So this is important, our ability to connect with people. And a big part of that connection is shared values. What do you believe is important and how do you act on those beliefs? Like, so just popcorn in a room. Give me one value, I'll go each table, that you think is important. One value that you think is important. Trust. Loyalty.
Respect.
Oh, really? You were like, respect, maybe? I think it's important. One value.
What they all say.
All right, trust, loyalty, respect. Okay. Next table. Compassion.
Responsibility.
Responsibility.
Kindness.
Kindness.
Honesty.
Honesty. Forgiveness.
Empathy.
All right. Understanding. In the back. Integrity. Yes.
Authenticity.
Okay. Transparency. All right. So out of all those, what do you think the most important? All right, trust. Yes, and, right? They're all important, equally, right? The sticky part is, how do we hold them all at the same time, right? And where do we start? And what do we use? And who are we gonna be this way with? So for me, authenticity is super important, and it's kind of cumbersome to kind of define, but the way that I define it is showing up and clearly communicating what you can and cannot do, right? Who's ever shown up in an appointment and told their case manager, I've had a horrible day today, I'm not in the mood for your stuff, this is what I can do today. I got my paperwork, I don't want to do any small talk. I got kids that are crying, and I just want to get in and out. If I said that to you, how would that land with you?
Great. I had somebody who would work at night, for example, and in the morning she would come in and she would fall asleep. She was, I'm tired. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do this while you take a quick nap. I'll be back in 20 minutes and do this paperwork. Because she was being authentic.
Absolutely. And many times, authenticity will allow us to access all those other things, right? Because when we can't show up and be ourselves, then we have our masks on, and then we feel a certain way about ourselves, and we feel a certain way about this other person who we feel like has made us be inauthentic, right? I hate going to this office, because every time I see her, I gotta put on my right face, I gotta talk a certain way, right? She's judging me. I know she's judging me because I can see it in her eye. Who feels judged a lot? Nobody else? Where are you living? Because I want to move there. Right? Because it feels like every day, especially being formerly incarcerated, I know I look my little pink sweater, but it still feels like you can see prison on me sometimes when I walk into a room. Right? And I'm sure that's not true, but it's just my perception. And so it is important for us to be able to show up in a way that not only feels authentic, but it demonstrates authenticity, and it's a space where it's safe to be yourself. And so long-term impacts, right, the depth of this emotions. Many times it is important for us to understand that the emotional impact that we have on people will carry on for a long time, right? We remember people who've been nice to us, but we also remember people who've been mean to us. I've mentioned Wendy from the Chico DMV 5 times in the last half hour, right? Yes, right? I remember Wendy. You look a little bit like Wendy, but no. So it's important. It was a ponytail. It's important to understand that emotional impact is lasting. And the reason is because when we negatively impact someone emotionally, that's traumatizing. And our body holds trauma on a level like no one else's business. And so many times, it may not even be that person anymore. It could be someone else who made us feel like that other person, right? So always keep that in mind. How am I emotionally impacting this person who's in front of me? Especially if it's someone who has access to my child, right? So when I show up for a parent-teacher conference, I can come in there and knock all the stuff off the teacher's desk. That's how I feel about you in that report card, right? But my kid has to come back to the school the next day. So it's important for us to understand that the way that we connect with people emotionally is lasting and can affect them in a bad way. Empowerment. So empowering individuals to participate in advocacy efforts. Again, when we can connect emotionally and I can get you on my side, you're gonna work really hard for me. You're gonna work really hard for me. Because one, we have a personal connection. We have some shared values. I understand that my emotional content and connection with this person was positive, and I want to really motivate them to help me. I need them in my corner. So part of that, again, is looking at how do I motivate this person. And I know many times people's like, oh, it feels like manipulation. The difference is intention. What is our intent? And then lastly, authenticity, genuine emotional expression. So this is another example from my work at the shelter. We were in the midst of a lawsuit. Like the city was being sued. We had a lot of lawyers coming around. And one day I'm at work and there's a lawyer who's on ground, who's an advocate, but really, really mean. And so she's saying a lot of harmful stuff to me. You don't really care about homeless people. You're just here for the money. You think you're better than them. So I started breathing deeply, just taking some really deep breaths. And she said, what are you doing? Are you tired of me? I'm like, no, I'm just like trying to regulate myself so I don't lose my job. Like, you are really mean. And you said some hateful stuff to me. And she looked at me, because no one had ever said that. I don't think she's ever had a guy be emotionally vulnerable. But for me, like, this is the way I transact my life. And so I told her, you hurt my feelings. And she didn't know what to do with that. And later on, we had a really good conversation. So a big part of authenticity also is clearly communicating what's going on inside of you, right? Who in here has ever told a teacher, you hurt my feelings the way you spoke to me? I don't like the way you spoke to my child. Who's spoken to a service provider? And okay, so how did that work out for you?
We don't talk anymore.
But how do you feel about you?
I felt good.
Right? This is part of us in all those domains. In my dignity, in my belonging, in my safety, I don't have to shrink. I can advocate for me and my child. Part of that advocacy is telling this person, hey, the words that you're using on me are harmful. I know your intent was to like help me move forward, but the impact, it was really negative. But in the same way that we're looking at other people in that way, we have to look at ourselves in the same way. We have to be ready to hold space when someone tells us, hey, you hurt my feelings today when you said that to me. And not just like, oh, you'll be fine, right? Because that happens in our families a lot. Like, who shows up at home in the house and tells their parent, because I'm 53 and I've told my mom, hey, you hurt my feelings. Oh, you grown, you'll be all right. It still hurt, right? So when we're not validated even in our own homes, it becomes difficult for us to seek validation outside of our homes. Right? Because if we're not getting it from our loved ones, I know this person who's on the other side of a glass is not going to give it to me. So it's important that it starts at home. Because we do it with our kids, right? Like when a kid falls, what do you tell your child when they fall?
Okay.
Oh, wait.
I tell them to get out.
Oh, you're that mom.
You'll be fine.
Rub some dirt on it. All right. So as a boy, with a boy mom, if your son shows up and he's hurt, let him be hurt. Let him cry. Because this is what I realized, and this is the mythology of our system, right? And you can tell me if I'm accurate or not, so I'll just like look at the room to see if this is a true statement. So we'll tell our sons, get up, stop crying. You're not really hurt, right? Rub some dirt on it, right? And then fast forward to our partner relationships. Why are you not communicating with me? How come we don't talk? What's going on inside of you? I need you to be a little more vulnerable with me so that we can work this out. So as a boy, I don't know how to do this because from a child on, I've been told, stop crying. Don't be weak. Be a man. But now as a man, there's a requirement for me to be able to communicate, to be able to share the work of relationship, right? The reciprocity of emotional content. So, from one boy to some boy moms. Nurture that. When they want to talk about their emotional content, talk to them about it. Allow them to express it. Because we're experience-dependent beings, and so in order for us to gather this experience, to learn how to be really good communicators as men, it needs to be nurtured as a child. And so there's a thing in many of the families in my community, parents and caregivers will raise girls and love boys. There's a premium on raising women, because in many of our communities, women are the backbones of our family units. They're the most consistent. They're the foundation. They're the rocks. So it's important for us to raise and love each gender so that they know that there's no boy box, girl box, that this desire and need for communication transcends gender. Like, we all need the ability to communicate in a way that is constructive. Understanding emotions. This is super important in advocacy. And I've talked about it a lot, but when we're passionate about something or righteously indignant, yelling at someone else that has the power to do something for us, many times it's not going to be helpful. The reality is we're all human, and many of the people who are in positions of service may not have done the work necessary to be empathetic and compassionate and understanding, and may be on the back end of multiple days of overtime, or just not nice people and looking for a reason not to help us. So really understanding that emotion and affect are contagious, right? Who's ever been around someone who's really happy and you just felt happy because you're around them, right? It's contagious. Who's gone to that friend's house who's always in a bad mood, and then as soon as you get in there, you're like, ugh. Right? It's contagious. So it's important to understand that emotions are contagious, and many times emotional content is signaling something to us. Something's going on. And it's important to understand that if you have personally experienced a lot of trauma, the biography of your emotional content is going to be linked to your trauma. So that's super important. The way that you process your emotional content is going to be heavily influenced by your own experiences of trauma and or resilience. So let's talk about the communication influence, attention and memory. Can you track a conversation? Can you remember what was said? Have you been so angry that you forgot or did not process what that other person said to you?
All the time.
That happens, and I have done it in session with clients where I've been so triggered, I forgot what I wanted to say, and all I could think was like, you're horrible. So it's important to understand that, again, when we're really triggered, when our affect is activated, our attention and memory can be impacted. Perception and interpretation, intention and impact. So my intention may be one thing, the way it lands, the impact may be another. So I think I'm really funny, right? I think I'm super funny. But sometimes my humor impacts differently. So I have to be mindful of my audience. So, I'll send out a few feeler jokes, I'll pick on a few people and see how it's landed. It's like, okay, I can keep going, right? But it's also important to understand that when we are trying to advocate for someone, that we're really mindful of our intentionality, but also the potential impact. Because people's perceptions, again, are always going to be influenced by their previous experience. And if we have a significant amount of trauma in our life, my ACEs score is 8. 8 out of 10. That's my ACEs score. So I have to be very, very vigilant when I'm interacting with other men, especially other men of color, to remind myself that's not my dad who was never there, right? Or that's not my uncle who was really horrible to me. I have to be mindful of that because my body has stored all this trauma, and many times if I'm not aware, it will respond to this other person before I even open my mouth. So we have to be aware of our own perception. Like, how are we actually perceiving this? What else is it beyond what this person said? Especially if we don't know this person from Adam, but all of a sudden we're just mad, right? That's our trauma response, right? Next, motivation and engagement. Why are you there? And this goes back to our first, for the sake of what? Are you showing up in this place to be right? Or are you showing up in this place to make things right? And many times, if you're showing up to be right, that's your issue. You're not working on behalf of your kid. You're working out your own stuff. But if you're working on behalf of your child, you're trying to make things right. Because that child can't advocate for themselves. That child needs you to be the best that you can possibly be in that moment to make sure that the rest of the school year goes off without a hitch. So, your motivation. Remember why you're advocating. Remember this. This is your anchor. When we talk about an organizing principle, when we're moving from center, it is because I'm here to advocate for my child. I'm not here to be right. I'm here to advocate for my child. And you may have to tell yourself that over and over and over to remind yourself so that you don't cuss out the person in front of you. Because this is super important, because I know it feels really good sometimes to drop a few F-bombs and say an MF this or POS that, right? You feel great in the moment, but as soon as you walk out the door and you holding your kid's hand, Mom, what happened? Oh, nothing. Let's go get a hamburger, right? Because you realize, oh, I should have did that differently. So remember this, your motivation and your engagement. Decision making. Life is always about choices. And we may not like some of our choices, but we always have a choice to make. And so when we're making decisions, again, for the sake of what? Is the action I'm getting ready to take going to move me and my child forward, or is it just going to make me feel good? Who's ever made that compromise? Where you knew this was not going to move your household forward, but you really had to tell this person how you felt about them? Who's ever done that? Right? And then on the drive home, you're like, but that's okay, because it's a learning process, right? And many times, people don't teach us this stuff. We don't know it, because this is what we've been taught. Who has showed up someplace and acted just like the parent that you can't stand, and then told yourself, oh my God, I can't believe I did that, right? That's the power of modeling, right? Because we learn by what we see. And again, our kiddos are looking at us. So this is not just good advocacy, right? This is good teaching. Because our children need to see us hold our stuff together in the midst of chaos. I had no idea we were poor as a child. I had no idea. I thought money grew on trees. Because every time I asked my mom for $1, she had this little change purse. Or I literally thought bras produced money. Because I would ask my mom for money, it either come out the change purse, or she just pull $1 out of her bra. It was like magic. Because one time she caught me in her bra drawer. She's like, what are you doing? I was like, I need $1. Right? And she's like, and she just shook her head. Right? But she learned from watching. Right? So I didn't know we were poor. Because my mom, that was her job.
That's good though.
I had really good experiences. Right? Every day that I came home, my mom read me a story. Every day. She would come home, pick me up from daycare, cook dinner, read me a story, and then I go to bed. Because I think I slept with my mom until I was like 6. My stepdad hated it. Right? He hated that. She was raising 2 kids, and it was always a competition, me and him. But part of this is like the decision-making things our decision-making process must always be in the furtherance of protecting our children, right? From the impact of circumstance, right? And we all try to do a good job on that. So think about that. The decisions you're making, is it protecting your child? Not only from physical harm, but from emotional harm. But this doesn't mean not telling the truth, right? And this is the sticky wicket of parenting, is how do you serve just enough truth to the child so that they can move forward, and not so much that it wounds them. So hearing you're just like your dad who's in prison is true, but harmful. And I didn't need to hear that. So there could have been a different way to communicate that. And so that's part of our decision-making process, is we have to understand and learn how to transmit information in a way that's not harmful. The next is behavioral response. What do you do when you hear bad news? What do you do when you hear no? So who's lost it because a service provider has told them no? Who's ever been upset and kind of like visibly lost it? Yes? Yeah? How many times have you got mad at your kid because you told them no and they didn't like no?
Probably a lot.
Where'd they learn that from? Right? So it's important again, right? Like, they're looking. Mommy said she gonna tear this whole place up. Oh, right? So when he hears no, I'm acting like mom. I'm tearing up the preschool. Why'd you throw all the Legos around? 'Cause I tore this whole place up. You said no, right? So it's important for us to understand that our behavioral response is teaching, right? It is this modeling. You'll hear social learning all the time, social and emotional learning all the time, right? Over and over and over. Most of that teaching is being observed, being through observation. How does mommy deal with stress? Now the child does not know, he's not saying in his 4-year-old brain, oh, let's see how mom deals with this stressful situation here, right? Oh, she's a little dysregulated. Oh, no, mommy, don't do it, right? But they're still processing it the same way. They're still watching. And so this is a really good thought experiment for you. For the rest of the week, tomorrow and Sunday, look at your child, how they deal with no, how they deal with yes, and how they deal with no, and see how much of your own behavior do you see in that. Just watch it. That'll be super important for you, because then you can really see the power of that. Strategies and techniques. Empathy's influence. The ability to get someone to connect with your story is so powerful. It is so motivating. It's like kryptonite. If you're trying to figure out how you can motivate someone to help you or buy into your position, look for something in common. Look for something that they can relate to in your story, or you look for something that you can relate to in their story. And I'm not saying this is for the purposes of manipulation. This is motivating, because again, if you can connect with this person on a human level, it's still connection. And who knows what will come out of that relationship. The next, visual and verbal communication. Fix your face. I don't care how nice you sound. If your face still says F you, it still says that. Joy would tell me that all the time. Because I'd be moving around, super professional, very well spoken, but she's like, oh, but your face says it all. I'm like, what are you talking about? I was nice. She was like, yeah, you were nice, but your face. Fix your face. right? Because how many times have you been interacting with someone and they said all the right words, right? But you knew they were saying, you have a nice day, right? I hate that, right? That's like a punch in the mouth, right? Because you know it, because you've used it, because I've used it, right? Done something halfway shady emotionally. You have a good day now, right? And you're like, what do you do with that? And then you go to complain. Okay, well, what did my employee say? Well, he said, have a nice day. Well, I will, okay. So fix your face, because that's super important. And when I heard that, like I took a training and I think I blushed, and I'm a mahogany hue. So when they said fix your face, I was like, ooh, they're talking right at me. Like, why are you looking at me doing this training, right? Because it kind of unpacked for me, because my face, yeah. So fix your face, right? Smile. It takes less energy to smile than it does to frown, right? But really be mindful of your nonverbal communication, because 80% of communication is nonverbal. It is. Look around the room. You can see people in various states of reception or opposition based on their face and their body. So he's like, I don't know if I'm selling him right now, because he's like got his hands crossed. Oh, there's a smile. He's like, all right, I got him, right? So like it's very important, right? When you're sitting, perfect example. How many times have you been lecturing your child, and as soon as they cross their arms, you're like, oh no, hey, right? Because they haven't said anything, but this means I'm not listening to you, right? You're gonna put me in a corner. Let's just get it over with, right? So fix your face. This is super important. And then storytelling. A good story is worth $1 million. I love telling stories. There's so much to be communicated. There's so much instruction and education that you can provide with the story. I had a 90-year-old aunt who lived through the Depression, World War II, the war on drugs, like all these things. And I remember she was telling me, like, I had just gotten out of prison and I was getting ready to go back. I didn't know it. And I'm telling her, Auntie, you don't understand, right? Things are different out here in Los Angeles now. And she proceeded to tell me the story about coming from Texas to California. And it was a pretty good story, but she wrapped it up with, and I've never forgotten this. She says, you think you're living a brand new life. The only thing that gets old are money and clothes. Ain't nothing else changed out here in these streets. I'm like, who is this lady? Like, what? Like, she dropped a gem. And I've never forgotten that. So storytelling is super important. And for parents, this is the one thing that I hold against my mom. I hold a lot of things against my mom, but this is the one thing that's like I can talk about. My mother was the oldest child of 5 siblings. 3 of her brothers were criminals. She was the baby mama of a Black Panther. My mom had a lot of street cred. She had seen and done a lot. But as a child, all I saw was a person that worked 2 jobs, came home, cooked for me, and read for me. I had no idea about this other life that my mom had led. So when my mom told me when I was getting into trouble, hey, the streets will take you in and they'll throw you back out. You don't know what you're talking about. You go to work every day. You don't know what's going on out here in these streets. So part of your superpower as a parent is your own lived experience. Your kids are not going to do anything that you have not seen or done yourself. Do not stand in the mythology of parental uniqueness that somehow you can't communicate. I've done that, don't do that. Because what they need most many times is a concrete example of why something's not going to work. And if you can give them through story a concrete example of why a certain behavior is not going to serve them, it will be powerful. Because kids will look to the street for credibility before they get it at home. Because home is just a place where, meals are cooked and it's warm and it's safe, and my mom doesn't understand. So who in this room had a parent that was probably low-key a gangster and you didn't realize it until you were an adult? Right? And you could have used that information when you were a kid. Right? Man, if I would have known that my mom was like sort of a pretty bad, right? Had some cred, I would have listened a little more. So capitalize and utilize your own experience to move your child forward, but also to modify behavior, because they need you to be honest with them in a way that they can appreciate. And kids have a desperate need to respect their parents. They want to idolize their parents, right? And when you see that moment in time where they're looking outside of the home for identity and affiliation and belonging, this is where you get to kind of feed in your own experience. I know you're going out here, I know you have a need to connect, but just let me tell you, this is one of the possibilities, and this is how I know this. So just utilize that. All right, emotional intelligence, EQ. I don't know why they say it's EQ, and there's no Q in intelligence, so it's like, I don't know. All right, so emotional management. How many people in here have trouble managing their emotions? All right, it is a thing. Emotional management is a skill. It's a perishable skill. If you don't practice it, you'll lose it. It requires you to engage in this practice every day and not just in times of high stress. So whether it is prayer, mindfulness meditation, or some other type of self-soothing activity that allows you to quiet your nervous system in times of stress, you should be engaging in it. But a big part of emotional management is building connection with people, right? Like everyone in this room, I'm sure, knows the power of connection with regards to self-regulation. When kids are young, they need you to help co-regulate, right? Like this is how they learn. Like, are you okay, mom? All right, you okay? Okay, I'm okay, right? Because who's ever seen that where your kids literally looked at you like, do I need to take off my pamper right now? Because I'll take it off. Like, what are we doing right now, right? Because they're looking to you to co-regulate. And so think about, as an adult, do you have that one person in your life who you can call to help you calm down? Does everybody in here have that one person? All right, who believes they don't need that person? Do you reckon? No? Yes? All right, we all need that person. That's a patriarchal myth, that we don't need anybody else. We all need people. Like people and communities is the key to our species. So building connection is absolutely important. Engaging attention. Many times we, even as adults, have this need to deepen our sense of self-efficacy, which is our notion to do stuff. Or look at me, look what I'm doing. Look, I'm doing a good job, right? Who's ever called their friend just so that you can tell them, I did this thing and it was amazing, right? That you want someone to bear witness to, right? So this is what this engaging intention is, right? We need to have people to bear witness to our struggles, but also to our success. Because this is key, this whole notion of reflected appraisal, the ability for someone to tell us what they see in real time about us. Inspiring action, right? Who's got that call from a friend and it just made you want to get up and go exercise or do something, right? Like, again, when we're trying to advocate and we need something done, we need to be able to mobilize and galvanize the troops, right? Now, if I called you and said, hey, we ride at dawn, right? We go burn down the DMV because I saw Wendy, right? You're like, I don't know what you got going on with Wendy, but I'm good, right? So it's important for us to be able to inspire action in a way that people want to participate in that. Overcoming resistance. Many times people's resistance to anything is because they don't know what's going on, right? Or they don't have enough information. And this is what I hate. I hate it when people think I won't understand. How many times have you failed to communicate something to someone else because you're like, oh, they're not going to understand. They're just not going to get it. No. Don't pander to that expectation. Give someone the grace and the courtesy of unpacking what's going on. Because if I can figure out what's going on, I might be more motivated to help you. And if I'm the person who is the gatekeeper, tell me what's going on. I might be able to figure out a way, right? So don't count on the expectation that a person can't understand or is unwilling to understand without first seeking to try to transmit some information so that they can understand it. And maintaining resilience. I don't care what's going on in your life. You can do anything, just don't quit. Just don't quit. Get on a treadmill. It's still movement. There may not be forward motion, but it's still movement. Don't quit. The world is committed and expects for you to quit. Because I'm sure all of you at some point has had a job where you hoped that that person just didn't show up. Like, I've been guilty of that. I had a client call and cancel yesterday, and I was like, sweet Jesus, and I ran out of my office, right? But don't quit. Don't be that person. Because many times, that's the difference between success and failure, right? You must be willing to do what you need to do for you and your child, right? Again, not just to be right, but to make things right. So advocacy effectiveness requires emotional intelligence, which is 1, empathy and understanding. My ability to walk in another person's shoes, which gives me understanding of their own experience. Effective communication is skillful communication, and it is not using the truth as a weapon. Who's ever had the truth used on them as a weapon, right? It is not nice, and it is not effective communication. So a part of effective communication is ensuring that your message was received. I'm sure every parent in here has bent over, looked their child in the eye, and said, repeat back to me what I just told you before we go in the store. Right? Establishing effective communication. Please tell me what mommy wants you to do when we walk into Costco. Keep my hands in my pocket and don't touch anything. Say one more time. Keep my hands in my pocket, don't touch anything. Yes, let's go. Right? So a part of advocacy is effective communication, right? Ensuring that your message has been received and asking for clarification. How many times have you been somewhere, someone was saying something to you, you didn't quite understand, but the shame didn't allow you to say, I don't understand that. Right? So part of effective communication requires you to seek clarification. If English is not your primary language, ask for a translator. Do you have this document in Spanish? Por favor. That's part of your advocacy. The notion that just because your English may not be as good as someone else's means that you don't have a right to something is not true. It is just the language that you're speaking. 5 minutes? Okay. Wait, and I'm done? Really? Oh, wow. Okay. So, effective communication. Conflict resolution. Again, this goes back to our initial point. Trying to make things right. Like, how do we make things right? How can we collaborate instead of negotiate for the release of hostages? Right? How can we work together? How can we see each other as individuals that both have needs, that both have desires, and both have an outcome? Like, what's our end game? What do I want to come out of this? Resilience and adaptability. The ability to keep going, but also pivot. This sometimes requires you to give yourself permission to do something different. And like, when I first heard that, I was like, well, what do you mean I got to give myself permission? And then it hit me, there would be many times in my life where I would keep going in a course of action because I had to. That's the rule, right? I'm not gonna let you talk to me like that. Or pushed in on a decision and then someone says, well, you don't have to do that. And you're like, no, I'm already all in. No, you can change your mind, right? It hasn't gone so far that you can't say, you know what, I've changed my mind. You're right, right? Being adaptable. Building relationships and coalitions. How many people in this room know more than the people at their table? Does everybody know everybody in this room? So at some point today, you should walk around and introduce yourself to someone you don't know. Because if you're all parents through this organization, this is your organization. You should know the people that you're working with. I bet your kids know each other. How come you don't? And if it's good, if those relationships are good enough for your kids, then why aren't they good enough for you? Because you never know when you're going to need someone in your corner that shares your same experience. Because they may have a skill that you may not have, or you may have a skill that they don't have. And when you guys work together, it may be super powerful. Again, that goes to inspiring action, right? So my last inspirational request today is for you guys to, and gals, excuse me, to meet someone you don't know. Introduce yourself. Take a walk on a river. Go for coffee. Go to the park. It's springtime, so it's going to be a glorious spring in Red Bluff. And don't say anything different, because it is. Right? As I was coming up here, Orchard, Sacramento River, beautiful sunshiny day. It's gorgeous. You see the pollen, yes. So again, empathetic communication transcends words and actions to touch hearts and minds. So if you can connect with people on an empathetic level, they get you. And the one thing that you have to know, that there is more shared experience on this planet than not. We may be different socioeconomic statuses, we may have different grades of hair, we may be even different colors, but we've all been hurt, we've all been happy, we've all been sad, we've all been glad, and we've all been inspired by one thing or another. And those things are things that we can agree upon and move forward with.